All right, Will, pitch me. We're talking the smartest SEC fan base. I think that's going to be either really, really easy, and we're going to feel like we defaulted to the easiest answer because there's an obvious answer, Vandy, or we're going to have some good pitches in here and we're
Mhm.
going to rethink what it actually means to be a smart fan. And being a smart fan does not necessarily just mean you are at an institution that requires you to be smart. It means
Right.
you are a fan base that thinks logically, that thinks
hmm
intelligently, that is not delusional. Does that feel like a fair bar to set for smartest SEC fan base?
Yeah, it's like how Cardinals fans say they're the smartest fans in baseball.
I appreciate you saying that just to get me fired up.
They
Um,
say it. I'm not agreeing with it.
if there's a take that maddens me more than that one, I haven't found it. Yeah, Cardinal fans just the best breed of human and baseball fan. They just get it in ways that nobody else
We could
does.
never hope to. Yeah.
We don't know how to cheer for the right things. Only Cardinal fans do. They don't gatekeep any of that stuff. When they're up 7-0 in a game and then a former player hits a solo home run, the Cardinal fans are the smartest one because they'll stand up and cheer for it.
hmm
If it was a game-winning home run, would Cardinal fans cheer for their former player after hitting a home run to take the lead? No, they wouldn't. But because it's 7-0, they're the smartest fans of baseball. Anyways, let's talk smartest SEC fan bases. Not that I'm mad about any of that other stuff.
It's a table set. I like it. Yeah, they got the handbook out. But that's a great example. Like some fan bases make their whole thing about being smart. Like some fan, oh, we're the oldest fan base. We're like, when you think about like, that's how I imagine like Lakers Celtics fans. They're like, well, my grandpa was a Lakers fan. Your team's only been around since '04, and it's like, okay, like yeah.
Is there? I have an example that comes to mind for when it comes to national fan base that's considered by many to be the smartest fan base. Some might say they're delusional, but is there one that comes to mind for you?
The smartest. See, it's tough because the bigger the fan base is, the more like bandwagon and like sidewalk fans are. And again, I've always said I'm a sidewalk fan of LSU. I grew up in Baton Rouge, didn't go to LSU, so like I can't obviously talk any mess there. But yeah, like something like Yankees fans, there are just too many of them. There are just too many of them to actually count because the weighted average just kind of mirrors the populace. I mean, in terms of like a sports fandom, I feel
No,
like
it's just college football. Just
oh,
college
sorry,
football.
sorry, sorry. Yeah, just college football. I think that like some of the, I think there have been some fan bases that get it. Like honestly, I know we talk about them a lot. Iowa's a great example. I think they have been really playing along with it. They're not saying they're going to beat Ohio State every year. They're not saying okay, whatever, but they really respect what they're good at and they know what they're good at. They know their punters' names, stuff like that. Yeah, I think that at times it's interesting because a lot of it's tied to passion. Like I've met lots of very very level headed Auburn fans. I also know what Auburn fans have done at a macro scale. So it's hard when you talk about a college university because, as we've talked about, before, basketball fans are different than football fans. Baseball fans are different. But yeah, I don't really know if there is outside of like like a Northwestern or some type of school that's like good at like Duke football is a good example. I'm sure they would have super smart fans.
But that's the thing. Like, are we just defaulting to the academic institution? Because if that's the case, then we'll just put up like an academic poll results, and we'll just say what's the smartest university, and then we'll just kind of be done with it. There's no real pitch in something like that. What
No,
I'm
no, you're
saying,
right. You're right. I'm just saying it's almost like the amount of bandwagon fans you have is inversely related to it. That's why I said Duke football because Duke basketball is not like that. And so, point being, like it's a suffering fan base, right? It's like the way that almost like Browns fans are in the NFL. It's like nothing is keeping you here. Like the fans that are the most logical are the ones that are acknowledging kind of their suffering, or if they've been consistently pretty good they at least acknowledge like why, or they don't freak out when things go bad, which is very few fan bases to be clear.
I think Nebraska and Iowa fans are two that come to mind immediately.
Right.
Nebraska gets a lot of credit for that, and it was a different conversation. Like I remember hearing that conversation 2013 of like how smart the fan base was. You can't write dumb stuff and get away with it. You will always be tested on the ins and outs of the specific roster, like in a fan obsessed way, but also in like oh man, like they actually know, you know, they know the different key pivotal moments of
Mm-hmm.
what their team has gone through and how that's impacted them, and how certain decisions have come across, and they have more probably self-awareness than some might realize. Now, again, that was like 10 years ago. That's a
Mm-hmm.
little bit different than any sort of Nebraska fan that's telling you that they're about to win a national championship when they haven't been to a bowl game since 2016. In my personal experience, Nebraska fans, Iowa fans have had a lot of self awareness that I think would definitely check these boxes. They have been suffering in their own unique ways. Nebraska fans more than Iowa fans recently, for sure,
Mm-hmm.
at the expense of Iowa. But yeah, the fan base who kind of understands what the program is, what the program is trying to do, and how to react to certain things. Like I remember like having Iowa friends that weren't necessarily my two close buddies, Ben and Bronson, who like after they walloped Penn State in 2021, and that was like a top 5 matchup, I think at the time, they were like, yeah, this team's not good. Like this Iowa team is not going anywhere. Do not get it
Yeah.
twisted. And maybe people have like a different perspective of like 2015 Iowa because that was very vocal with the disrespect that they were getting from the Colin Cowards of the world and stuff like that. But self awareness, that's
Yep.
kind of what we're talking about. Maybe we should have phrased this differently as like most self-aware fan base, because really that's kind of more so what I'm looking for than just
Mm-hmm.
do you have a bunch of brainiacs within your fan base.
I think as you're saying this, and you're right, there's a couple of names that have also stuck out to me. Oklahoma State fans have impressed me.
Oh,
They're ones, they've kind of been all over the place. Like they've actually had some legitimately contending teams. Like had 2 or 3 in the last, let's say, 15 years. Obviously, the 2011 team. There was that one that like narrowly missed the playoff in 2021, I believe. Yeah, and they
the Baylor game, yeah, Big 12
Yep,
championship.
exactly. Yep, they were in to stand up, but yeah, they I've seen them in the kind of Big 12 Twitter be kind of like cool, and they are kind of like they've had the most success, honestly, of the Big 12 teams when you really think about the amount of 10-win seasons, but they are kind of, I hate to say little brother because it's so diminutive, but like their record against Oklahoma is not great. You know what I'm saying? They've had some big wins for sure. Don't get me wrong, but they know that, and I think that the way the kind of other left out Pac-12 schools has been pretty like Oregon State fans, Cal fans, Stanford fans. That one's not related to education as much. They might be crazy. I don't know. But the way that their fan bases have reacted to that news on Twitter, just being like, hey, like, as an Oregon State fan, like, we pretty much kind of knew what was happening. We know that we don't have Nike money. We know what's up. This still sucks and we're sad about it. But, like, what are we going to do? And, like, watching them actually have real, like, they're not sitting there saying, we should be in the Big Ten. They're not sitting there saying we have the same value as a USC, but they're like, can we just play some football and not lose our Apple Cup, please?
Yeah, and now that you're mentioning some of those schools, I'm wondering, does a smart fan base yield more stability at the head coaching spot? Is that part of it? Is when you don't have a fan revolt, an unnecessary fan revolt, does it lead to more stability? I mean, sometimes you could say that's a good thing. Sometimes it's maybe not a good thing. And sometimes you
Yeah.
do need fans who are reactive in ways that athletic directors are not. And so maybe sometimes it kind of pays to be a little bit more volatile. Like people always want to like clown on Tennessee fans for being as crazy as they are and for, the Shiano, that whole thing and the way that played out. But at the same time, yeah,
They were right.
it led to Jeremy Pruitt. So it's hard to say that this was
But it got here. You know what I'm saying?
but
Shiano was.
it eventually got here. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, you're right. You're right. They were not right necessarily. I think Jeremy Pruitt just kind of was like a panic hire, but I think they got to the place they needed to get. And as you say that, man, it just feels like Iowa's running away with this because they have a longtime head coach who has limitations, and they don't really try to fire him every year. That's like the only coach that's been there. Because even like, I mean, I guess Saban doesn't really count or didn't really count because why would you ever fire Nick Saban? But outside of that, like guys are trying to fire Dabo. That's nuts to me, you know?
yeah, I mean, I could understand the arguments, and there are certainly different pockets of fandom. So it's
Mm-hmm.
going to sound like we're generalizing today. That's not the intent, but it just kind of comes with the territory. So we'll try and not do too much of that. Let's start with the Saturday
One more note. Wisconsin
Yeah.
fans pretty cool from what I've seen.
Yeah. I've dealt with a decent amount of Wisconsin fans. One of my family friends growing up was actually Bucky the Badger for a bit.
No
ironically enough.
way.
Yeah. He's got some stories. Shout out Henry Slingerland, great pride of Lake Forest High School. The Wisconsin fan base is a unique one, a self-aware one, like that understands. And Big Cat is probably as vocal of a Wisconsin fan as there is, and
Mhm.
understands that his team isn't winning a national championship. Like the goal is get to the Rose Bowl, do this, and this. And having that perspective is kind of what we're talking about. And maybe some fan bases, they get knocked for not being as smart because it's harder for them to have that perspective, or because they've seen those highs, it's harder
Yep.
for them to have that self-awareness, that intelligence. So look, your own personal experiences are definitely going to impact this conversation, but that's the point of Pitch Me. And so we will truly, I think, today be able to listen to pitches to sell us on the smartest SEC fan base.
Because I'll tell you who has no entries in our comments, Connor. LSU.
LSU did not make the cut today. We don't need to disclose any biases.
No reason to disclose. I'm not making that case for my people today.
None. Yeah. Look, I mean, there is something to be said for someone that can sing Call in Baton Rouge and Neck and just not miss a beat. That takes some intelligence. There's to be able to remember that, you got to be musically gifted. There's a lot of lyrics that go into it. You know, just saying, just throwing it out there. All right, let's start with this one from Sports Mafia LLC. That's not intimidating at all. Who says University of Florida was voted #1 best public university in the USA. This is a fact. But the reason this made the cut is, Will put this in here. This Sports Mafia LLC, who I'm a little bit worried about saying anything negatively about, they doubled down and tripled down. They continued with, let's see, Berkeley is a horrible school. The teachers and students are all extremely ignorant people, and they have been raising tuition every year for over 20 years. I got a master's degree from Florida for $20,000 total with no scholarship. You can't even do that in half a semester for that much at Berkeley. Also, yeah, another shot at Berkeley, wherein Sports Mafia LLC said, if you think Berkeley is a great school, you were either brainwashed or just painfully never have been there. I took an LSAT prep class at UC Berkeley, and it was a terrible experience. Worst students and teachers I have ever met at any college. I've experienced 40 to 50 different colleges, either attending, visiting friends, or going to sports events.
This is the reason why I like this one so much. Is this just shows the exact disconnect? Like, let me tell you something. I didn't get into the University of Florida. I applied. It was one of the schools I applied to. I applied to a ton of schools. They were one that said no thanks. I didn't have great grades. I was locked into my future career path, and therefore I'm here. But Florida is a great school, okay? But this right here is why I don't think they can make it for the smartest fans. Because I see someone who went to Florida, and I know they did something academically that I could not do, but yet this dude is just fighting with randos about LSAT prep courses at Berkeley. It's the classic, you try to sound smart and you end up sounding like Dwight Schrute.
Florida will double down and then just go to whatever lengths possible. And I think that's reflected in the Florida Twitter that I have dealt with. Sometimes great. Sometimes you know what, just hit the old mute button and go to a different conversation. That they have a lot of that. And Florida has a little bit of the Michigan vibe where, you know, there is a certain standard that is always going to be at the forefront of the conversation about coaches, about who's good enough, about whether or not the quarterback play is up to their specific standard. And while I do think that people that graduate from Florida have a higher IQ than me, based on my personal experience, I will say they're probably not making the cut as smartest fan base. Maybe not always the most self-aware fan base. Now, I will say, I think they're pretty self-aware with how difficult the schedule is.
Yeah.
I do. I have seen a lot of smart Florida takes about that from Florida fans, and recently kind of, you know, writing about some of that stuff as well. And we talked about it with Chaos Narratives. So I'll give them the benefit of the doubt there. But that's going to be an awfully difficult pitch for me to hear based on the way that Florida fans, I think, come across sometimes without even knowing that they come across that way. Does that make sense?
Well, I think Florida has the highest discrepancy between people that attended there. Like, I could name, 10 people that went to UF that I think are super smart. Talal, that used to work at SDS, is awesome, super smart stats guy. Kevin from SDS, super smart, Florida grad. But the thing is, I talk to and love those people, and they're my friends. Those are not the people that talk to me the loudest online. And so for the LSU fans, we're all kind of crazy. We know that about ourselves. I could have a conversation with two Florida fans, one that went there and one that did not, and be like, dude, there was a Florida fan, not a Florida fan, a Florida student at the FSU game, and I was talking to him the whole time. I was like, you know what? Let's just talk about your schedule this year, Hoss. And he was not dumping on us. He was not doing anything mean. We were having a great time. I was like, man, if more Florida fans could be like this guy. And I realized he's like a doctor that was like going to school in Florida. I was like, that'll do it. Well, FSU fans were just screaming and trying to throw stuff at me. I was like, you guys were winning. Relax.
Yeah, FSU fans were a very on edge bunch all of last year. It felt like, and it turns out, understandably so. Florida fans, though, they are a very specific group in the SEC.
Yep.
That look, they're going to rub some people the wrong way. That's just the way that things are. And when you have as many coaching changes as they've had, yeah, they're probably not always going to be painted in the best light.
Yep.
All right, let's go to this one. I don't understand this one. I'm just going to preface this by saying that MSH Austin, sure.
Okay.
I'd like to think Hog fans, but the insistence by the fan base in wearing camo, even to swim meets, gets it an auto DQ. And for the record, that means disqualification, not Dairy Queen. Well, it can also mean Dairy Queen.
Don't limit yourself there. Come on.
Yeah, seriously. I don't get this one for the life of me. And maybe I'm just missing out on this one. They wear camo all the time?
I don't know. Yeah, this is one of those where, like, hit us up. Like, if you could send me 5 pictures of a ton of Arkansas fans wearing camo at swim meets, then go for it. It's just, we both were like, that's not our experience. But, like, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe they just love camo, but good for them.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add to this one other than okay, that'd be a unique quirk. I don't really know that adds or takes away from the fan experience and how smart they are, but I think Hawk fans are at least a bit more realistic. It helps when you've been humbled too,
right?
When you've been humbled like they were in the 2010s with the Bielema thing looking like it was going to work out and then not working out, the Chad Morris thing never even having a chance to be able to work out. And now getting back into this place, I think Arkansas fans do have really good perspective of being the smartest ones in the SEC. Though there's nothing that I could say definitively that makes them stand out, and I could be wrong on that. But maybe having, you talked about it before of like trying to be the everything school. Florida does that as well. Tennessee does that, obviously. Of like, hey, we're not so like too invested into this one thing. And it allows us to have better perspective on these other things. Maybe that's a part of the conversation as well.
Yeah, and like one thing I'll say about Arkansas fans, which is like kind of one of our descriptors here, is they've been really good sports whenever I've dealt with them, right? And Arkansas has been the team that's ruined LSU seasons. Like that's kind of their kryptonite team where they play Alabama after the bye week. They come and beat up after the Bama game, which is usually a loss. Arkansas then shocks them. Like I've seen that 100 times, or not 100, but I mean they beat LSU in 07, right? Like and they were not jerks about it. It was just like. And they also have an edible mascot, so you got to kind of take everything with a grain of salt. Where it's like, hey, you can eat our mascot for fun, and so I just feel like they're very funny when they beat you. Like they're like, I'm like, okay, dang, you got me there.
Yeah, the hog is just an underrated mascot, but
Tusk.
I mean, look, we can save that. We can save that discussion for another time.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to this one. You knew it was coming. Old School Fanatic. Oh, by the way, Fanatics, like actual Fanatics, the company gave us a little shout out here, said that we should give everyone a quiz. I'm not against that idea. We might have to circle back to that. Old School Fanatics says, Vandy without a doubt. I've said forever Vandy should move to the Ivy League. They would be champions every year. And then piggybacking off of that, so we'll just combine these two. Giabella Mom 01 says, after Vanderbilt, probably Texas A&M voted best public college in Texas over University of Texas and is highly competitive. Okay, so the Vandy thing. It's the people itself who are being judged in this topic of smart, right? Like nobody is denying, if we're talking about universities in the SEC, Vandy has different standards than the rest of the conference. Okay, that has been shown not just with admissions and stuff like that, but how they actually spend their money, and that's the biggest indicator of how a school prioritizes things, big picture things. Vandy's going to win that argument every single time. But there's 2 ways you can go with this. Vandy has either figured this out, that maybe the rest of us invest too much of our time and energy into football. And that makes them smart because they're like, we're going to go off and do these great things. Like we're gonna figure out things that actually matter, that benefit society and our time and our bank accounts and stuff like that. And maybe they've figured that part out, and so their fans deserve to be considered smart for that reason. Or alternatively, maybe they're the dumb ones that just don't quite get it yet. Maybe they're the ones that haven't looked at this massive opportunity that is getting an SEC revenue check on an annual basis and understanding how much that could benefit so many of these areas that would provide you more entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably somewhere in the middle, but I don't know that we can sit here and say a fan base like Vandy's, just because of what they do from an academic standpoint, automatically makes them the smartest. Because I know when I come out with that crystal ball every single year, and it likely has Vandy with 1 or 0 SEC wins, I do actually hear about it from Vandy fans. And they'll get in
Mm-hmm.
my mentions and say, blah, 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 blah. And then at season's end, I look up and I'm like, so who was right about that? Yeah, so
Who's smart
look,
now, guys?
who's the smart one here?
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I don't think we can default to just what Vandy is all about and make that the cop out answer. What do you think?
It's almost like an N/A, right? Because you could look at someone whose life has led up to a path where they have attended like maybe the best university in the South and one of the best in America in Nashville, Tennessee, and go, this is a legitimately smart person. Like this person has it kind of figured out. Like you spent those extra, whatever, 20 hours cumulative or 100 hours, whatever. I'm not smart. I don't know how being smart works, but you spent those extra hours to like really study and really like take the time and pay attention in class. And so your life is now set up to where, you know, you might get out, get better opportunities. You get to have a great time in college, da da da. But yeah, then like as fans, I now give them credit for the like I always joke about like if the ball is round, we are sound. Like they're great at baseball, bowling. We're good at basketball. Shout out Festus Ezeli, right? Like, but I think it's like I said, it's kind of an N/A because like my cousin went to Vandy and cheered at Vandy, and she's like an Alabama fan. You know what I'm saying? Like it's that feels almost like at this point, especially if you are like an all day Vandy fan, like, are you okay, bro? Like, you may not actually be smart if that's how you're spending your time.
That's what I'm saying. So look, a lot of different ways you can go with that. Joshua Morris had another good point on top of that I want to include here. He said in Saturday Down South podcast Facebook group, he said Vanderbilt is the only right answer. What other team would storm the field calmly? Shout out Florida.
Supports. They have like a meeting schedule. They're like, all right, guys, look, so we're going to storm it right now. Okay. Then we're going to have a minutes come out. We're going to have a note taker. We got to figure it out. All right.
But then the counterpoint is you're going to get fined anyways.
Get your money's worth.
Get your money's worth. Vandy did it wrong. You shouldn't have stormed calmly. You should have been willing to be able to get after it. So look, I think that actually hurts Vandy. That's a good point, but I think it hurts Vandy. Josh Steele says UGA, the coach is literally Kirby Smart.
All right, man.
Can't argue with that.
It disqualifies you. Actually, you're done.
Okay, let's do. Okay, I have a couple more that I want to get to. Tanner Stars. He says it's Kentucky. They fully understand their position in the SEC landscape and are not coming for their coach after a down season. Their expectations are firmly planted in reality, and that is not applicable to any other SEC fan base. I kind of agree with this. I kind of agree. And look, I have a different perspective of Kentucky fans. I admitted that, talking about, when we're talking about biases and stuff like that, my brother lives there. My sister-in-law works at Kentucky, and I have a different understanding of who they are. Like my sister-in-law's mom is like diehard Kentucky basketball fan. And it's an entirely different mindset with Kentucky football. And that's how a lot of Kentucky fans that I have dealt with are. And it's almost like because they've been humbled so much on the football side and because they put all of their eggs into the basketball basket, it allows them to actually look at things with a more objective perspective when it comes to football. So I don't hate that pitch at all. Like I think that there's really a lot of truth in that. And if we're talking about self-awareness, I do think that Kentucky checks a lot of those boxes.
So I should have used this instead of Duke for an example because there are just so many more Kentucky football fans. I fully agree with this. I think if we're talking about football fans, I think Kentucky has the most rational, smartest football fans of anyone. The problem is, of course, Kentucky basketball fans, of which, Drake is one. You start to get into bandwagon aspect because they are sickos for basketball. And I mean that in the most endearing way. Like the way that I'm a sicko for like recruiting or LSU football, they're that way for basketball. So football feels like a little bit of like dressing or like sprinkles on top. But I mean, I think that's the other thing is that like, Stoops and Cal, and I talked about them being linked at the time. Like, I think that the heat on Cal was very deserved. I think that team stuck with Cal longer than they probably could have and should. And they didn't riot. They didn't set anything on fire. They didn't boycott. So honestly, it's like, yeah, I mean, even at like a Tennessee, I don't think Cal lasts more than 2 or 3 years after like 2018 or is when it really got bad.
But let's leave it to football. We're not
Right.
talking about like every other sport, because then you get really into the weeds with certain things.
Yeah.
And if we're just sticking with football, that's kind of the ideal scenario, is it not?
Yeah.
And we talk about yielding a coach with stability. Kentucky has that with Stoops, and I think that there is some frustration now. There's frustration after the way the Texas A&M thing played out. There's no doubt about that. We'll see what that looks like now, and now that it's known that there is actually a job that maybe he would consider leaving for that isn't Iowa or something like that. But it is definitely a fan base that has an entirely different reputation in one big revenue sport compared to another. Let's end with these two, and I'm very tempted to have these be our winners because I think they're excellent. Corey Puckett, not to be confused with Kirby Puckett, but Corey Puckett says, if there is anything I've learned from social media, it's that college football fan bases are all incredibly stupid. Trick question, but I suppose it's probably Vandy if I had to guess. Okay, yeah, something to be said for that. Chris Tapley says, none of us. That's why it's so much fun. If we aren't beating each other with mustard bottles and corn dogs with neck playing in the background, what is the point? He's not wrong.
That's the other end of the Vandy spectrum is LSU fans, right? It's like, well, you are having the best time.
And maybe that's what smart fan bases do, is they understand, look, you're not going to win a national title every year. You have to enjoy the crap out of every single season, because if you don't, then you're going to look back 20, 30 years from now and say, what have I been doing with this fandom, this passion that I have in life, in which I don't feel like it's ever been satisfying enough. So if you're not enjoying it, and if you're not doing all those things, then maybe you're the dumb fan base, and maybe you should be out there playing neck and throwing mustard bottles and calling the hogs even when you're 2-10. Like, this is the stuff that makes fandom great. So maybe that the answer, Will, is that no one has the smartest fan base, and that we should actually, instead of rewarding smart fan bases for having great self-awareness, we should just say, you know what, screw it. Let's all be dumb. Let's all be irrational. We can be smart about other things in life. We can be, but let's all be dumb about this. Let's just appreciate that.
So I'll say this, like T-Bob, our boy, said it best. Historically, LSU is like Greece, right? when they're
It's pretty good.
When they're high, they're on top of the world, all right? But when it's not so hot, it's not so hot. LSU, I have often said over the course of my life, it has been more fun to be an LSU fan than a Bama fan. And I stick by that so often because there are so many losses in my life that I've just gone, all right. And people are going to call that loser mentality. I don't care. LSU has more natties than everybody but Alabama. Right? I don't care. That's the best part of it. And so, like, Georgia fans, you guys don't take winning seriously. All right, have fun beating Kentucky, bro. We have wins against Bama. And so, point being, like, I think that
LSU fired.
Well, it's like I've had people. Here's the criticism of like from Ohio State fans and like Georgia fans, like these fan bases that consistently win 10 games. It's like, well, you guys just don't have that standard that we do. Yeah, we have championships.
Like, got 2 in the last 3 years. I mean, just say. Like,
and LSU has been in 4 in my life and won 3. That's still bigger. So
yeah, I mean, I just wouldn't. That wouldn't be the team that I would say like enjoy. Beating Team X.
No, I know, but I'm saying that in terms of like everything is about the standard now. It's about not having fun, right? Because that's the Nick Saban method. That like, and Kirby has a little bit more fun, I think, than Saban did. Like we talked about them, like running the fun formations and run up the score, stuff like that. But I think that we've been kind of brainwashed by like the Saban way of life to just think that winning should be like business and you should expect it. And that's all I'm saying is that LSU has been lucky enough to have like a big win about every year, have beaten like a top 10 team or at least a rival team or ruined a rival season or done something like that. And so I think LSU is so unique in that way that like, it's impossible to have a hollow 10-win season in the SEC West, pretty much is all I'm saying. So
True.
I think that like that doesn't necessarily make LSU better off. I think they've just been in a very unique position, because like Tennessee fans do not have as much fun as LSU fans do because they have had much more embarrassing losses. So being over invested is only good if your team is good, is all I'm saying. Because unlike the quote unquote like fan passion investment tier, like Tennessee is right up there with LSU, but putting that much effort into Tennessee has been roundly a worse gamble than with LSU. You know what I'm saying? So that's my only point, is that being dumb fan guy is good when your team is good, but it also leads you to just want to fire guys or want to be like, we had LSU fans, I guess they wanted to bench Nussmeier or wanted to bench Jaden Daniels this season or last season. And it's like, guys, you don't see the big plan. So like, that's the thing, is that being passionate is good if your team backs it up, is all I'm saying.
Ideally, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It makes the world go round.
Yeah.
It does. If everybody was smart and always had the best opinions and there was never any discourse about any of this stuff,
Yeah.
I would be talking on a college football podcast in early June. Okay.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be. I like that's just the truth. So I mean, I'm tempted to say I like Chris's answer a lot. I really do. I also think that Tanner's got a point. I think Tanner's got a point about Kentucky fans and their perspective. So I'll defer to you here. Those would be my final two. Would you like to break that tie or go outside of those?
Let me add one caveat, because I kind of danced around this, but I didn't say it. When you start talking about the standard, you stop having fun. And I think that's not smart. I think that if I was and again, it sounded like I was like dumping on Georgia. If I was a Georgia fan, I would be lit as heck watching us blow out everybody. I literally would love that so much. It's just when it starts to be an expectation and it starts to be a comparison and every loss starts to mean way more and every win. And it's just like, I think that chilling out is the key, right? It just enjoying the wins, not taking so much out of the losses. And yeah, I think oh man, I mean, in that way, you almost got to think of an Ole Miss, right? but that would be the funniest.
Now we're getting back to who is the best tailgating, and that's
but like that's the they are smart because they really enjoy the wins and they don't really care about the losses. So like anyway, so point being, I think their fan experience is great. So yeah, I think that in terms of overall, and like we had A&M shouted out, I get that. Texas is an answer that I think that's another place that like you could go and have a lot of fun. I think that for the sake of this. Oh, and also shout out Adam Spencer, who said that Mizzou fans are the smartest fans, as he is a Mizzou grad. But
very
I think
unbiased opinion coming from Adam. Yep, appreciate that.
But I think that like you would have to go with like a Kentucky or even like a Mizzou that's like, hey, we are rational about our expectations every year. We do not expect a championship or bust. We have fun when it matters, but we also don't get too down on it. So yeah, I kind of love Kentucky as an answer. I think that you're totally right, which is that when you start to be obsessed with being the smartest and the best fan, you start getting away from what being a fan is. And that's why we talk about like the personal seat licenses and the prices of games going up and like not being able to bring your family to games and stuff like that because people are gatekeeping fandom. So number one, I think you're totally right. I think we shouldn't gatekeep fandom, and however people want to have fun, they should have fun. But number two, I think that the fan base that has a lot of fun and still isn't super duper crazy has probably been Kentucky football.
Yeah, I'm okay with that answer. I am. And, I remember being there for the 2021 LSU game, and Kentucky's off to that great start. And LSU is obviously it's in the midst of a loss season. Coach O ends up getting fired, of course. That game was
after that game, I believe, right?
Well, that was when they made the decision, but it came a couple weeks later. And the mindset of Kentucky fans, because Georgia was up next. And the Georgia game after that, I remember like they're like, yeah, we're gonna enjoy this. Like we think we have a really good chance to beat LSU. And then the Georgia game, Georgia's Georgia, but we're gonna enjoy this. Like we're off to our best start, and like since the Bear Bryant era, they're gonna take advantage of this opportunity, of this time, and just like soak it all in. Because why wouldn't you? And it's not what's on the horizon, what's next. You got an SEC West power that's a traditional power that's coming into town, and enjoy it. So I've always kind of remembered that as well. That definitely helps with a pitch, but I think Kentucky's our answer. Smartest SEC football fan base. Not smartest with every sport. We're not saying
Right.
that definitively, but smartest SEC football fan base, Kentucky.
Oh, I do want to give a interesting note here. Talking to an old like Bear Bryant era Bama fan is really nice. As well as that may sound, that's actually a lot of my family, is from Alabama. And when you talk about like these old stories about like how the games used to be, how they remember players, and how they can kind of compare and contrast that to what's going on today, that's super cool. I think that anyone who has like that kind of a universe scope and can see things in terms of, well, yeah, I mean, Derrick Henry might have won the Heisman, but my favorite running back was this guy from, the 80s or whatever, or Bobby Humphrey or something. So, yeah, I think those fans that have been around forever also, and like have stuck with it and have grown up with it, I think is very cool.
Feinbaum gets into a good deal of those conversations too. And I
Yep.
know sometimes people will tune out callers and stuff like that, but some of the times that he can go down a rabbit hole and talk with
Mm-hmm.
some of these people and some of the memories that he can bring up as somebody that did not grow up in that era with that perspective, it is actually really entertaining once you kind of get down that sometimes and you learn something. And yeah, that's definitely a different type of intelligence to be able to have that perspective from, an era that was half a century ago to be able to talk
Mm-hmm.
about. Very different, probably, than the current modern Alabama football fan. All right, that'll do it for Pitch Me. It had been a minute since Pitch Me, so it was good to be able to get back to that. Good to be able to have you back on. If you have not, leave us a 5-star review. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Saturday Down South on YouTube, where you can watch every single episode of the Saturday Down South podcast. Follow us on Twitter at the STS Pod, at Sat Down South, at CJ Rivera, at Go So Hard. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.